A Passion for Mushrooms by Chrononautical. Chapter 5. Just Desserts. The feasting in the great hall of Erebor went on for hours. Huge roasts of venison were picked to the bone, shining glazed fish were devoured, and every plate that had been graced by savory brown mushroom sauce for the big trout was licked clean. Almost 100 spring chickens had been roasted with sage and mushrooms, and every morsel of that meat was savored with an appreciative dwarvish grunt. Of the enormous tureens filled with mushroom stew, only a little broth remained in each. Of the mighty bowls of potatoes mashed with mushrooms and cream, barely a trace of starch yet clung to the golden dishes. Even the breadcrumb stuffing had been decimated, and Bilbo noted with pleasure that all the black trilbies had been picked out of the vegetable primavera and eaten. Plenty of dinner rolls were left, and dessert was yet to come, but Bilbo heard the satisfied groans of well-fed dwarves ringing out all over the hall. To his ear it was music. Listening to Gandalf tell Bane, Bard's son, about the meal even as Bilbo was doing the same with Thorin was an amusing counterpoint to that melodious song. "So halflings eat like this all the time?" the boy asked earnestly.
"Like this? Certainly not, my boy. They might eat in similar quantities at a birthday party, and most hobbits have large families and enough friends for a birthday party invitation to come round at least twice a week, but in this style? No, this should be counted a rare feast indeed in the Shire."
"Because of a few mushrooms?"
"But you must understand, my dear boy, that hobbits love mushrooms above all things. You have lived all your life on a lake, and so you well know that if you fish with leeches you will catch one thing, and if you fish with earthworms another."
"Of course, everyone knows that."
"Of course, to be young and know all that is worth learning."
"No, Mr. Gandalf, please, I am sorry. Do tell me about hobbits."
"Well, then, I will tell you this. If you wanted to lure an elf, you might bait your line with a bit of poetry, for elves live long lives, and they care most for that which helps them pass the time in entertainment. If you wanted to lure a man, I might suggest coin, for men have very little time on this earth, and they often spend it struggling to achieve one thing or another. Coin, which eases many difficulties in the wide world, is of great value to men. To catch a dwarf, you had best bait your line with gold, for it is their toy, and they take great joy in shaping it to their whims. But if you wished to catch a hobbit, you could not do better than to lure him with a mushroom."
"You cannot be serious! Instead of gold!"
"Oh, yes, for I have never met a hobbit yet who would part with a black trilby if he had only one. Not for any amount of gold in the world. Certainly, if he had several, he might sell a few, but the hobbits he sold them to would pay a very high price indeed, and count themselves grateful to do it."
"But that is not the same as it being more valuable than gold," Bane argued. "For a dwarf might pay gold for food. Everybody needs to eat. That doesn't mean he values food more than gold, only that he is hungry."
"Well, I might argue that in such a moment the dwarf must indeed value the food more than the gold to make the exchange. I will cede your point. So look to the people as a whole. Dwarves live most often in mountains, mining and working at their craft. Men live most often in cities, building, fighting, and competing with one another in turn. Elves live always in some natural place, writing their poems and playing at their music, but hobbits live only around the Shire, and they farm. Those that do not farm, garden, and those that do not have gardens are considered very poor indeed by others of their kind, forced to live in houses built above ground and quite dependent on the kindness of wealthier neighbours."
"For mushrooms?"
"Yes, among other things."
"For some reason, the way Master Baggins talks, I did not think that there were poor hobbits in the Shire."
"Where there are rare things which are considered good, there will always be some with more and some with less. So I tell you, Bane, son of Bard, that there are poor hobbits. Poor hobbits live in houses above ground instead of cozy burrows, and the 7 meals a day which they enjoy feature buttered potatoes more often than mushrooms."
7 meals a day does not sound very poor to me," the boy said softly.
"Nor to me,"
the wizard agreed.
"No one ever goes hungry in the Shire, save during times of great evil like the fell winter when all go hungry. But that does not mean everyone eats well. No, some are wealthy, and in the Shire, that means mushrooms.
The lad hummed thoughtfully to himself. I suppose people are different everywhere, though it seems strange to me still to count wealth in such a way. I am sure it is good enough if it makes them happy.
It would serve you well to remember that when you are a king yourself. And this.
What?
This next,
The wizard said simply. What next? But Bilbo did not hear the rest of their conversation, for just then the king spoke, demanding his attention.
I suppose it is time for me to make a pronouncement,
Thorin said abruptly, looking around the hall.
What? Already? You have not even had dessert, your majesty.
Bilbo looked hurriedly down at his own mostly full plate and Thorin's empty one, trying to catalogue by absence whether or not the king had truly tasted every dish was futile, but the hobbit could not afford to misstep. There was too much at stake. If he succeeded, a whole acre of black trilbies would be allowed to grow and flourish in Erebor. If he failed, then all those lovely mushrooms would be lost.
I am sure it will be good, but it will not change my mind. Already many of my people fall into an after-supper stupor, and I would have this heard.
Well, at least tell me, did you like the mushroom itself? You're brilliant.
The mushroom itself?
Yes. It was extravagant in the extreme to just cook them up like that with the other vegetables, but, well, you are the king, your preeminence, and I thought that if you could taste one, just one, you might, I thought you might like it, your supremacy.
I did not eat one of the mushrooms alone,
Thorin admitted slowly. What?
They flavor other dishes so powerfully, I thought it would be too pungent to eat one alone. I do not much care for vegetables.
Then what is the point of anything? Casting about frantically, Bilbo noted with panic the same thing that had brought him pleasure only moments before. All of the black trilbies had been picked happily from the communal dish. There had never been any on Thorin's plate, and so there were certainly none left there now.
Master Baggins, do not trouble yourself,
the king said.
I did not mean to distress you so.
There was a trilby left on Bilbo's plate. He had helped himself with a hobbit's gusto to the vegetables when they had come around, but then been far too nervous to do anything but pick at his own dinner while Thorin ate. It was inappropriate, of course, and wildly so, and Bilbo knew that even in his panicked state. Yet dwarves would not understand the impropriety, and it was a desperate moment. Bilbo could not afford to sacrifice an acre of black trilbies to his own cowardice. Stabbing the mushroom with his own fork, he held it up for Thorin to taste. Time seemed to slow as the king leaned forward. Bilbo could smell him. Over the many pleasing scents of good food and mushrooms, Bilbo could smell fire, metal, and the opulent incense that followed the king under the mountain. Beneath that, he could even smell the warm, earthy richness of the dwarf himself, a scent that Bilbo had come to know well over the course of their long journey together. A scent that Bilbo often missed during the lonely watches of the night in his quiet guest room. Thorin's lips closed around Bilbo's fork. Bilbo felt it, just a little shift in pressure, a change of the weight against his small, unworthy hand. For a long moment, the hobbit saw how big the dwarf's mouth was against the gold of the fork, and the shining metal looked more beautiful than ever before when contrasted against that dark beard. Then Thorin pulled back with a deep hum of pleasure that seemed to go straight to Bilbo's heart and pass through, shaking the hobbit's very bones.
Oh.
Those impossibly blue eyes were wide.
It is not too strong at all,
Thorin said around the morsel. Bilbo could see his tongue, could see the food that had come from Bilbo's own fork, could see those perfect white teeth chewing.
I like it.
He liked it! A mushroom picked by Bilbo's own hand and cooked by no other, served from Bilbo's plate with Bilbo's fork. He'd taken it directly into his mouth. Bilbo could give him other things he would like those too. Sweets, kisses, a long slow... But, of course, Thorin had no idea at all what the gesture meant to a hobbit. Dwarves did not find meaning in food the way hobbits did. Bilbo had seen Gloin offer Oin tidbits from his own supper around the campfire many, many times, though they were brothers, and Gloin was ecstatically married elsewhere to boot. Bolver made a game of throwing food into his brother's mouth, while Fili and Kili shared cutlery frequently, mostly to have the washing up when it was their turn to do it. The entire company had often shared everything on the road, and there had been no flirtation in it, just as there was no flirtation in the gesture now, not on Thorin's end, at any rate. Surreptitiously, Bilbo took a tiny morsel from his plate and tried to taste Thorin on the fork. He almost failed to notice when the king rose from his feet and the hall went quiet.
It is known in Erebor that 6 times I have tried to give reward and been refused,
the king under the mountain said. Bilbo squeaked and dropped the golden fork with a clatter against the table. He'd forgotten that it wasn't only mushrooms at stake tonight. Thorin's plan all along had been to use the occasion as an excuse to give Bilbo his coming-away present.
For great valor in battle, saving my own life and the line of Thorin, I have offered gold, mithril, and jewels. I have offered valuable heirlooms, beautiful metals, and finely cut stones. All have been rejected, but I will not suffer that a 7th time.
Shaking, Bilbo squared his shoulders. He had stung spiders, run from dragons, and riddled his way out of dark places. He could accept a gift with grace. He could leave a party with a polite smile.
The argument up to this point has been that payment for services rendered was given and accepted. There was a contract guaranteeing a burglar 1/14th share of the treasures of Erebor for what help he could give facing down the dragon and recovering the mountain. Of the great deeds done on that adventure I will not now speak, save to say that the contract was fulfilled beyond any right of hope or expectation. 1/14th share of the treasure was well earned, but no sooner did the burglar have it than he gave it away. All of his treasure was given to the men of Lake Town as reparations for the destruction wrought by the dragon we woke, and to the elves of Mirkwood, in the form of some trinkets of theirs left within the mountain, to buy peace between Erebor and that kingdom.
Thorin nodded at Bard and Tariel, who both gave him half-bows in return. Bilbo had to admire the build-up. No amount of fast talking from a hobbit was likely to turn aside the offered reward when the full weight of such a story was behind it. Not that he intended to try, but it might have been nice to have the option. It might have been nice to have one more day.
I have been reminded that the 12 of the contracts signed by members of my company all contained provisions not included in the one offered the burglar. Restoration of privileges lost with our home.
Thorin nodded to Balin and Dwalin.
Restoration of property.
He nodded to Oin and Gloin.
Granting of titles.
Dori and Biffer.
Guarantee of a mine.
Bofer.
Promise of a guild hall.
Bomber.
Assurance of a royal appointment.
Ori.
Royal pardon for past offences.
Nori.
Only my heirs do not have land and titles granted them in their contracts, and even they had certain promises outlined. Keely insisted on hunting rights to the entire western slope. Having never seen the mountain, he did not know how big that tract of land would be.
Laughter burst from the assembled dwarves, and the embarrassed prince rubbed the back of his neck with one hand.
Feely asked for a forge of his own, and the guarantee of a busy uncle's time, in writing, to finish his mastery of smithing.
If anything, Feely looked more embarrassed than his brother at this revelation, but the dwarves did not laugh at him. The people of Erebor looked on the heir to their throne with intense, misty-eyed fondness. Dwero had an innate respect for those who sought to master a craft.
No such provision of property or nobility was offered in the burglar's contract. Indeed, what right could any but a dwarf have to land within Erebor? What profit could come from the mine of a burglar? He would line his own pockets and rob the realm, for well was it known that there is no such thing as an honest thief. No one but a dwarf could have wisdom or good counsel to offer a kingdom.
Bilbo thought that was rubbing it in a little. It almost sounded like Thorin was going to destroy the mushroom mine in some kind of revenge for Bilbo refusing the other presents Thorin had offered. Of course, Thorin had always cared a great deal for revenge, but the Black Trilbies didn't deserve to suffer for a hobbit's mistakes.
That contract concluded with the death of a dragon, and it was paid. However, that contract made no mention of the great battle which was joined shortly thereafter. A hobbit from the shire, even a brave burglar, had no place on that bloody field. He was not contracted to kill the foul creature holding a knife to my nephew's throat. He was not contracted to put his own body between myself and the pale oak when I was stunned and lay bleeding. Erebor, would you see such valor go unnoticed?
A great roar of negation echoed up to the marble arches of the hall.
Would you see it rewarded?
There was a resounding cheer, and Bilbo felt his heart sink. Under no circumstances could he refuse whatever Thorin was about to give him so publicly. But he would miss Erebor. He would miss the echoing halls and the dwarven music. He would miss his friends. He did not want to go.
Bilbo Baggins, son of Bungo Baggins and Belladonna Took, master bugler, I Thorin called Oakenshield, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountain, do deed to you and unto your heirs, the naturally occurring cave chamber between the Hall of Echoes and the grand marketplace, hereafter known as Mushroom Mine, with all attendant rights and responsibilities. Let no hand profit from your labour but your own. Let no force take from you what is yours, so long as my reign and that of my line shall last.
Bilbo stared at the king, unblinking.
Do you accept?
Thorin asked after a long, silent moment. Gandalf?
Yes, Bilbo.
The wizard's voice was as quiet and conversational as it would have been during a fireside chat at Bag End, though Bilbo had no doubt that it was heard by every ear in the perfect stillness of the hall. New plan? Don't tell Thorin what the mushrooms are worth. The roar of laughter which filled the hall was deafening. Bilbo was out of his chair in half a second, shaking Thorin by the hand and thanking him profusely. Perhaps Thorin tugged at their joined hands, or perhaps Bilbo simply gave up any semblance of restraint and threw his arms about the dwarven joy. A farm was not a going-away present. A farm was a stay-forever present. When Thorin pulled back to put his hands on Bilbo's shoulders in a kingly manner, Bilbo just ducked forward and hugged him again. Chuckling, Thorin held the little abbot close.
I am glad there is a treasure in my mountain that has value to you.
Oh, don't be ridiculous, Bilbo said, swiping at his eyes discreetly. Probably no one but Thorin noticed, with all the cheering and puffing of ale going on about the hall. I'm not. This isn't about mushrooms. Only I thought it was probably time for me to be going, and you hadn't asked me to stay. Well, I'm just pleased, that's all. Grasping Bilbo with a force that pinned the hobbit's arms to his side, Thorin stared down at him. There was nothing even remotely polite in the dwarf's intense expression.
Stay,
he said fiercely.
I ask it. You have fought and bled for Erebor as much as anyone. This is your home. For as long you will have it. Flushing with pleasure, Bilbo looked down at Thorin's ornamental armor and tried to lighten the mood. Yes, well, you'll never get me out of your guest room now, you know. I have done impossible things before this day, the king said. Hurt, Bilbo looked up to see Thorin's smile soften, his eyes glowing with genuine warmth. But I will not push my luck. If you remain in my guest room for 1,000 years, I shall count myself fortunate to have had you so close. Bilbo grinned. He could take a little teasing, if that's all it was. Indeed, it made him feel like Thorin was his friend again, to be prouded so. As well you should. I'm a much better house guest than some I could mention. Always launder my own things, do the washing up, never keep my host up all night singing. Thorin laughed, but before he could answer, Bilbo was tangled from behind by Keeley. I knew you would not leave us, I knew it! Of course he would not leave us, Feely agreed, pulling the little hobbit from his brother and into another rough embrace. He would perish of boredom in a week without me to entertain him. After that, nothing would do except each and every member of the company hugging or bumping heads with Bilbo to repeated assurances that they had all known he preferred their company to his own land. It was a gainful and emotional evening for all concerned, not only the hobbit. In the background, while he was being crushed under Dwalin's armpit, he even heard Thorin stiffly inform Tadiel that she might be allowed within the mountain, so long as she stayed out of the royal bedrooms.
perhaps laughing at the way Keely tackled his uncle joyfully was incautious, as Dory quite knocked Bilbo to the ground with his next embrace. When Balin helped him up, he said how good it would be to have a voice like Bilbo's on the advisory council, but the hobbit was pulled away by Bumba before he could decipher what that meant. Fortunately, after the third time, Nori assured Bilbo that no one had placed a single unlucky bet against the prospect of his staying, dessert was brought out. The small mushroom-shaped cakes proved a welcome cap to one of the best meals of Bilbo's life. The very best, of course, having been held at Bag End almost a full year before. Another meal when he'd barely been allowed more than a bite himself, but had gained something far more valuable than dinner.